Some guys are good at controlling it while others think a little okay. Some guys are good at controlling it while others... Welcome back to my channel. If you've been here watching my videos all along since the beginning, then thank you so much for being loyal. It means so much to me that you would follow my channel and follow along with my story, because as many people know, authors think of their books as babies, and since I don't have any real kids, they're real important to me now. For those of you who are new, my book is welcome, first of all. And second of all, my book is a contemporary romance. And you've caught yourself in the middle of the book, just when things are getting juicy. So if I were you, I would head back to the beginning. There's links in the video as well as down below in the description. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon so you'll be notified as soon as the latest video goes up. And that way you won't find yourself getting behind. But right now is the time to go back, because I'm about to drop some spoilers on chapter 19. Neesa and Reuben hit a snag. In chapter 19, we saw how affected she was by the stuff that Jeff, or as she knows him, David, had said to her. I mean, her trust was already hanging on by a thread, or, practically non-existent. And Ben was just not having it. At this point, he's really invested in seeing this relationship through, whether he knows how invested he is or not. So let's move on to chapter 20 and see. Chapter 20, Reuben's perspective. He'd never seen so much green stuff in a person's grocery bag. If he had to endure eating bushes and trees to stay, he would do it with a smile on his face. Anything to keep Denise from kicking him out of her life. He didn't like how close a call it was. She had been ready to say goodbye for good, and might still, he feared. While he'd been explaining what he was doing at her last open house before the confrontation with Jeff, it dawned on him how unsettling his actions were. Not too far off from what Jeff had been doing, the major difference being that he was single and Jeff was married. Perhaps because of his job, he'd lost touch with decorum. If he felt for 1 minute that Denise didn't have feelings for him, he would have been out of there. As it was, he saw her struggling with the choice, but he was prepared to steer her in his direction, even if the #MeToo movement had put a damper on dating rituals. He wanted her so badly he hardly recognized himself anymore. Her socked feet whispered through the kitchen as she worked. She didn't say much except to direct him where to pull things and place them. She sneaked glances here and there, catching him staring. He wondered what was running through her mind. A whole week had gone by and he'd had plenty of thoughts about her, none of them fit for a lady's ears. She said, "Can you look in the fridge for a small container with dark yellow paste in it, please?" He jumped at the chance to help, lifting the closest item that fit the description she gave him. "This?" he asked. "Thank you," she said. She placed it on the counter next to the cutting board where she began to slice onions. He asked, "What's on the menu?" She said, "You haven't figured it out yet?" When he shook his head, she raised an eyebrow. "Thai yellow curry. Hope you like it, 'cause that's all I got." His shoulders hunched. "I've never had it before. Are you some kind of gourmet cook?" She said, "No. Have a seat. I can take it from here." He much preferred the view from the other side of the island. Beautiful wasn't a strong enough word to describe her, even as she busted his balls, taking her sweet time to forgive him. And for what? He hadn't done anything wrong. Whatever Jeff told her must have been a doozy. He wasn't ready to give her up, but damned if he didn't know she was too good for him. At this point, he couldn't stay away if he tried. Something about the way she took him back tonight made him feel she belonged to him. He tried not to think of the fallout if he hurt her in the end. His track record sucked to the point that hurt was inevitable, and he was selfish enough to want to keep her to himself, even knowing some other guy might be better for her. The pan erupted in a roar of sizzles as she threw in the fresh pile of onions. Then she unwrapped the chicken and began cutting the boneless, skinless breasts into bite-sized pieces on a different cutting board. He said, "Missouri teach you how to cook like that, all fancy and hoity-toity?" She choked out a laugh. "Not at all. I grew up on a farm. We ate a lot of meat and potatoes like most families. When my dad died, I took over the cooking duties since my mom had to work 2 jobs. I'd never tasted Thai food until I came to LA. He asked, "How old were you? You know, when your dad..." She said, 12. He said, "That's rough, but it explains a lot." She said, "Really? Like what?" She carried the chicken and the yellow paste over to the pan. Then she washed her hands at the sink. He said, "How strong you are. Most of the women I date don't have their shit together as much as you do. Is there anything you can't do?" She came back and began chopping some root-looking thing. She said, "It's more like I'm the one people dump things on because they can. In case you hadn't noticed, I have a hard time saying no." He said, "Works for me." She said, "See?" She made her point and shook her head. "Doing everything isn't the same as being good at everything. There are lots of things I can't do, or shouldn't do." He said, "Name one." She twisted her lips and gave a wry smile. "I'm terrible at picking boyfriends." Reuben pointed at his chest. "Are you referring to me?" Smiling to lessen the blow, she said, "The jury's still out on you. I can always say you chose me." He said, "Oh, so if it all goes south, I can take the blame?" She laughed and his heart sang. Man, when she insulted him, he almost loved her more. He swallowed hard. That was the second time he'd used the L word with her. He tried to pretend he hadn't thought it. He said, "Be honest with me. Am I so terrible?" She began to respond, then paused as a shadow crossed her features. "It's not really you so much as my judgment. My mom brought it to my attention that I don't have the best man picker, as she phrased it." She clenched her fingers in the quote sign. "And after Wednesday night, I have to agree." He said, "I imagine it's hard to trust after what your ex did, too." She made a scraping noise in the back of her throat. "You have no idea." She grew silent and her brow creased as if her thoughts had gone inward. Why do men lie and hurt women? Guilty as charged, but that didn't mean he wanted to talk about it. Answering her felt too close to confession for his comfort level, but Reuben still needed to earn her hospitality. He said, "Well, it's complicated." She said, "I know bro code. You mean you don't want to answer the question. That's fine. Never mind." She added the chicken and yellow stuff to the pan. He said, "Well, I know girls speak, and anytime a woman says things are fine, it means they most definitely aren't." She said, "True." He said, "Okay, I'm going to assume you're referring to your ex, but what I'm about to say in no way means I endorse his actions. To me, he was a complete dirtbag to ever cheat on you. You are the total package, but I'm not sorry he did because then I wouldn't have had a chance with you." She eyeballed him over her shoulder while stirring the chicken. He continued, "Men don't mean to hurt women. Sometimes we're just driven by well, you know. Some guys are good at controlling it, while others think a little sample is harmless, and maybe it stops there or it gets out of control. We're not big planners, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and we never put ourselves in the woman's shoes because, let's face it, those stick heels look like death traps. That doesn't mean we're bad, just..." She said, "Selfish?" His shame was evident as he dipped his head and shrugged, staring at the pan she was stirring. Denise asked, "Have you ever cheated on a woman?" He said, "I've always had open relationships and been upfront about it, so technically no." She said, "Is that what you want from me, an open relationship?" He said, "Wait, are you asking me if I want to see you walk off with some asshole to give him a piece of..." He gestured to her backside. "Hell no. Watching you with His heart jumped in his throat, cutting him off. It was the second time he'd almost slipped up. "That jerk-off, David? No. Once was enough. Are you cool with that?" She said, "I don't want to get hurt again." "I will not get hurt again. If you lie to me, it's over. Are you cool with that? Because if not, you should leave now. I mean it." She gave him a pointed stare that forced a lump in his throat, then went back to cooking. When he thought about it, his ego said, "Fuck this commitment shit," but his heart glued him to the seat. He allowed his silent posture to speak for his decision. With one major lie still between them, he vowed to keep this one secret. If he told her, the secret itself would damage them more than the lie. With her back to him, he found it hard to get a read on what she was thinking. He said, "What can I do to help you trust me?" She frowned while reaching to toss more stuff into the pan. Seconds ticked by as she stirred the contents. At last she said, "I don't know. Tell me a secret, something no one knows about you, not even your best friend." She turned to face him. "You do have friends, don't you?" He gawked. "Yes, of course I do." She put an impatient hand on her hip. "So, tell me." "I'm thinking," he said. One secret came to mind, but telling her he loved her after only one date was not smart on any level. "Well, I sort of already told you a big secret. On our first date, when I told you I found my dad." She asked, "Why is that a big secret?" He said, "Look, I'm a very private person. It's why I don't let women get too close, so they can't hang shit over my head when things go south. I mean, my best friend knows about my bastard situation, but there's a part I don't talk about with anyone." She raised a brow. He said, "My personal business is sacred to me. You can't tell anyone, understand?" She walked over to the pantry and pulled down a bag of rice. "That's the definition of a secret," she said, her voice tinged with sarcasm. "Lay it on me." I see you. If you've come this far in the video, then you should have liked it by now. You may not know it, but when you like my videos, it does something with the algorithms that helps other people see the video as well. So please hit that like button right now, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell icon, and let's get back to the story. The corners of his eyes burned with unspent tears, and he hadn't even begun the telling yet. He realized why she'd asked this of him. She needed a sacrifice, one that would shed some blood, so to speak. Maybe once it was all out, the inner turmoil would subside. He said, "Basically, well, I wanted to know if I came from something good. Does that make sense? I mean, my mom was no peach, and I guess I got my dating style from all the men I saw come in and out of her life, you know? But I tweaked it, came up with rules to justify why I was being fair to the women, but we didn't always part on good terms. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if my father had been there. Would I have turned out any different? Like, is my old man a good person? Because maybe that would mean I had some good inside me and not all the shit my mom left behind." Denise turned away from the stove to look at him. It was easier when he couldn't see her reaction, but acceptance wasn't what he'd expected. He carried on, more encouraged this time. "When I began looking into my father's identity, all I had to go on was a possible place he was from and a name. Boy, did I have a name. My mom practically tattooed it on my brain every day of my life. Whenever she didn't have enough money for the rent, it was that bastard Eddie Murray. If we ran out of milk, it was that deadbeat Eddie Murray. Anyway, I found a guy in Colorado who isn't an exact match, but close." Neesa said, "Is that where your mom was from originally?" Reuben said, "No, she grew up in LA. My mom met this guy after she moved to Vegas. According to her, they got married and then made me in the span of a week. She blew it up like it was true love and shit, but I keep thinking it was a one-off. I mean, come on, a night of sex, alcohol, and an Elvis wedding? He was in and out of her life in a flash and never looked back. The annulment documents were filed from out of state, and then he remarried, and now he has 3 kids. 3 kids who got to grow up with their father. My father. For a long time, I blamed myself." Neesa said, "That's crazy. You weren't even born yet." Reuben said, "I know that now. I figured it must have been her. I mean, my mom was always a crazy..." He caught himself. Not a wise decision to call his mother a bitch in front of the girl he was trying to impress. Denise turned the stove down and leaned her back against the counter, giving him her full attention. She said, "You can say it, just so long as you realize you wouldn't be here without her." He said, "I know, I just don't want you to take me for an asshole." She said, "I'd rather you not censor yourself. I've had too many guys tell me what they think I want to hear, but it's easier to deal with the harsh truth than both a lie and the harsh truth. Please continue." The way he saw it, if women ever found out how men's brains worked, there wouldn't be a straight female among the bunch anymore. He said, "I'll settle for saying she was crazy, but there must have been a time in her life when she was special to someone. People aren't born damaged. You can always trace it back to an incident. I know because she damaged me." She said, "Is that what you do, damage women?" Her question rattled him. I don't know. No, he did know. He said, maybe some. He wondered if the crease in her brow was sympathy or judgment or a flight response about to kick in. She said, have you ever gotten a girl pregnant before and skipped out like your dad? He said, no, my shit's on lockdown for that reason alone. She raised her brows. I can think of one occasion where it wasn't. His face heated in embarrassment. She meant their first night together. Nervous chills raced through his system and then targeted his sack, which shriveled upon impact. He said, that's never happened before. Right, she said with a hint of skepticism. If you did get a woman pregnant, you think you would repeat history? Gee, she couldn't have hit the nail on the head any harder. It was as if she knew him better than he knew himself. And how scary was that? He was afraid to say another word. Her head gave the slightest shake and she rolled her eyes. You're my worst nightmare. Reuben's mouth went dry. This moment was turning into his worst nightmare. What was the point of laying himself bare if she was going to judge him? He swallowed hard and said, I don't know who else to be to make you like me. She stood from the counter and said, I'm just saying that, look, I found that the current generation is usually set with the task of righting the wrongs of their family's past. The question is, are you prepared to do better than your father, better than your mother? If he told her he loved her, would she accept that as proof and drop these questions? No way would she believe him, and he sure as hell wasn't ready to confess he'd been getting to know her for the past couple of months due to the investigation he'd been assigned. He said, I'm here, which means I'm willing to give it a try, but I honestly don't know. I could argue that every relationship is a risk. Your ex, what was his name? She said, Tyson. He said, you probably thought everything was perfect until the day you caught him cheating. Aren't women always making lists in their head and checking them off while looking for their ideal mate? I'll bet you had a vision in your head of a fairy tale marriage, which is why Tyson's betrayal is so hard to get over. Face it, there's no guarantee. She stared at him as if in deep thought. He said, but I promised I will try to do better than my parents. So can I stay? You can try to push me out that door, but I'm warning you, I'm heavy. Huh? I answered your damn questions. Now can I have my prize? She crossed her arms over her chest, acting as if any moment she'd show him the door. Then she rolled her eyes and made a clicking sound with her tongue. If you weren't so damn cute, she mumbled. He smirked. You think I'm cute? All right, that's the end of chapter 20. So don't forget to like the video, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you'll be notified when chapter 21 goes up. And I'll see you then.